I'm Sam, and I'm with Oath Keepers, and that's an organization of military and law enforcement and intelligence personnel. And we're here to help some small business people in the Ferguson area secure their businesses.
Hmm. And how are you doing that?
Well, we post people around the bottom of the business and on the roof, and so we do a little bit of that with presence, and we use some less lethal techniques, and then we have more serious stuff, but we don't expect to need that.
Hmm. How many, if you're at liberty to say, about how many people are around Ferguson?
Of how many Oath Keepers?
Yeah, yeah.
More than 5, less than 500.
What their, generally what their day jobs are. If you could
Yes,
say that on.
they're Army, Marines, Air Force, Navy, Police, Coast Guard, sheriffs, and intelligence community people.
Hmm. And how long have you guys been here?
We've been here since the morning after the announcement. Our volunteers, our Oath Keeper volunteers, bought some plywood and some screws and helped these small business people. We boarded up these buildings for them to secure them because I don't want to call them a protester, but a criminal, which I distinguish between a real protester. A criminal threw a Molotov cocktail through the front plate window of the beauty supply place that's at the other end of this building.
Yeah.
And it caught her inventory and her store on fire, and it set off her sprinkler and flooded her business. And when I drove up here in my truck with the plywood and the boxes, I walked in the store, and she was standing in 4 inches of water, sobbing. And she was just frozen with her face in her hands. And I walked up to her and I said, "Ma'am, my name's Sam, and I'm with Oath Keepers, and we'd like to help you."
So how has been how have the community reaction to you being here been?
Well, the community, the local police and the community have been extremely positive. The St. Louis County Police have done excellent professional work. The Ferguson Police have been excellent and professional. And you realize I'm in a high position watching over. I'm in an overwatch position observing with optics and cameras and video and rangefinders. And we have the ability to see a lot, a long way both directions on South Florissant.
Yeah.
And I've seen nothing but professional police work from the local police.
How do you feel about the National Guard having a presence here?
Well, my son is in the National Guard, and I think they are quite helpful because the first night, and it's a significant issue, there wasn't National Guard at this location in Ferguson, and that's when all of the buildings got burnt. You know, the police just don't have enough personnel to guard a whole city. And there's just too many businesses, too many homes. It's an impossible task, so they need help.
Yeah.
And the National Guard provides a lot of help. It gives them a lot more coverage. It gives them a lot more eyes on the criminals, and it allows them to shorten the response time, you know, when there is an incident. And there were a lot of arsons here the first night.
Yeah. So what are some of the things you've seen from up on your perch there?
Well, one of the most dangerous things we watched a crowd of protesters, about 12 of them in a tight group. I was above them. You wouldn't be able to see this from ground level, but I watched a girl with a blue jean jacket tied around her hip. You know how they tie the sleeve around their hips and then the sleeves hang? And I was watching her through my binoculars, and I noticed that one sleeve was cut off and the other one wasn't. And I thought that was fascinating. And then as the group started to almost look orchestrated in how they moved, they made a circle around her, and there were 2 guys in the circle and her in the middle. And one of them pulled scissors out and cut the other sleeve off, the cuff off the other sleeve. And the guy on the other side of her pulled a beer bottle out that was half full with gasoline, and they took the sleeve that they'd cut off and stuffed it into the bottle like a wick. And they were literally making a Molotov cocktail while they were strolling down towards the protest.
Wow. And what did you have to do anything with them, or was there?
I reported it.
Okay.
You know, I communicated to some local guys what was going on, and we had eyes on it.
Would you be possibly able to say some of the equipment that you've brought with you, or
Say again?
just the type of equipment that you brought with you, whether it be?
Oh yeah, we have the cheapest equipment because our main concern is arson. is we have buckets of water. We have 5-gallon Ace Hardware buckets of water, and they donated
Yeah.
to these business people.
Yeah.
Great store here in St. Louis. And we filled the buckets with water and hauled them up to the roof. And we have fire extinguishers that we've placed on the roof to put out fuel fires,
Yeah.
Molotov cocktails.
Yeah.
And like our main goal is to prevent arson. So those are the two main tools that we're using here. And then we have less lethal options, shotguns with beanbag rounds and rubber bullets. And that's to repel people that are trying to break into the store, but not hurt them or or severely injure them.
Yeah.
But it's very uncomfortable to get hit with a beanbag round. And then we have options above that, levels of force above that if they try and use lethal force. And in Missouri, in the state of Missouri,
Yeah.
the law allows you to use lethal force for 3 reasons when you're not in your home. And the first reason is to prevent a murder or great bodily harm. And the second reason is to prevent a rape or a sexual assault. And the third reason is to prevent arson. And one of the previous news agencies misquoted us saying we agreed that lethal force should be used to protect property. And we do not agree with that. And that's not why the law allows you to use lethal force to prevent arson. It's not about the building burning.
Yeah.
It's about the people dying in the burning building.
Yeah.
And that's why in the state of Missouri we allow lethal force to be used to prevent an arson. And we have people living in apartments above these businesses. So it's very important that we don't allow people to set this building on fire.
Yeah. May I ask what you have on your person?
Well, sure, you can ask me questions about my weapons.
Yeah, just describe what you have.
Yeah,
or?
I have an SOG tactical knife. I have an FNX 45 tactical. And I have less lethal rounds and lethal rounds for my pistol. Okay, and we have tasers. And we have pepper spray. Okay, and so we try and give ourselves a lot of options for less lethal.
What are less lethal? Excuse my ignorance. What are less lethal rounds for a handgun? I'm just really.
They're projectiles that we custom make here in St. Louis.
What can you describe? I'm actually really interested. It's like just personally, because you always see less lethal rounds as shotgun shells. I didn't know that handguns had.
There's a number of types of less than lethal rounds.
Yeah.
There's rubber bullets. There are what they call sock rounds, where they take a piece of fabric and they have some BB shot that's covered in the fabric. It's like heavy.
Okay.
And then they tie it off so it looks like a teardrop.
Oh,
And then it gets shot out of the shotgun shell, and it spreads out when it hits you, so it doesn't penetrate you and cut you, but it leaves a nice mark, a bruise, and it hurts like all get out.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the outcome?
Well, as Oath Keepers, we believe that all religions, all races, all people of all financial means should be treated equally and should follow the same set of laws. And the purpose of Oath Keepers is to hold our politicians to account for following the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. That's the foundation of our law in the United States. And we have politicians today that don't care about the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or any of the things that are written into our laws. And it's really disturbing. And that's why Stuart Myers formed the Oath Keepers. Now, specifically about this particular grand jury ruling, I did not see all the evidence. As a matter of fact, the grand jury and the few prosecutors and court workers are the only people that saw the evidence. But when I first heard about it on television, my first thought that I relayed to my wife was, wow, we have multiple witnesses saying this. He was shot in the back and he was executed. And then we have witnesses saying the exact opposite, that this guy was aggressing the officer, and the officer fired twice inside the patrol car trying to get this guy out of his car and off of him.
Yeah.
And so I looked at my wife and I said, you know what? These two stories are so far apart that once the grand jury hears the evidence, there won't be any question about who was telling the truth. And I think the grand jury, which is a biracial, multiracial, male-female grand jury, heard the evidence and made their decision, and we respect that.
Yeah.
And I think honestly that Officer Darren Wilson probably did it right.
Do you what are your general thoughts on the city's response to it?
Well, I think it's a misnomer to think that the city responds to all of this, because what happened here in St. Louis originally, there were protests, and St. Louis County and Ferguson were dealing with the protest. And then the governor removed St. Louis County from command of handling the protest and put the highway patrol in control.
Yeah.
And they told officers to stand down and not arrest criminals. And how do you tell someone not to do their job?
Yeah.
I mean, they're trained to do their job, and you should let them do their job. And I think that was a huge mistake, both politically and socially, because the small business people and the average person in Ferguson paid a huge price from that mistake.
Yeah.
And when they put the highway patrol in command and took a much softer approach, it emboldened the criminal element. And that's when you saw an escalation to all of this.
Yeah.
And I blame that on Governor Nixon, to be perfectly honest.
So just in general about Oath Keepers, how could you just talk about just kind of the history of why the organization started and?
Yeah, like I said before, it's an organization that started because of the frustration with our own politicians not following our own laws. And you see that in the immigration, leaving the southern border open, and you see that with executive orders on things that a president does not have power to write executive orders on.
Yeah.
And you see things like the Department of Justice, Eric Holder, not answering subpoenas.
Yeah.
Whoever heard of the head law enforcement official in the United States not answering a subpoena?
Yeah.
If our head guy doesn't follow the law, then why should anyone else?
Do you feel like it's been what do you feel like the difference has been between the Bush administration and the Obama administration on just dealing with?
Well, honestly, I'm not a big fan of either, because both presidents violated our constitutional laws. The Patriot Act was a travesty. Every time the Patriot Act got challenged and went to the Supreme Court, it got dumped by the Supreme Court justices and ruled unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And that's the abusive things that put fuel on this kind of fire here in Ferguson. People are getting tired of being abused by their government.
Yeah. Really on both sides.
There's a lot of frustration on both sides.
Yeah. Do you have anything that I always ask at the end? Is there anything that you'd want to say?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We were working security last night up on this building, and the federal police, one of the federal police agencies, put snipers in a house in an overwatch position, and their snipers were pointing their guns at us. And so I dialed 911 and I said, this is Sam. I'm on this roof at this location with this organization. We're doing some private security here as volunteers. We're not taking any money for it, but please tell the team that just inserted in this house that we're the good guys and not to point their rifles at us.
Yeah.
And then St. Louis County police cars start pulling in the lot. And they're like, where's the sniper? We don't have a team in there. And I said, they're right there. I said, relax, they're probably feds. They look like feds, they act like feds, and they're terrible at setting up a hide. So they probably went to a 2-week school, and they really don't know a lot about what they're doing in an urban environment.
Yeah.
You know, the guy left the hall light on, turned the lights off in the room, and silhouetted himself while he set up. And it was like amateur hour. It was terrible.
Oh, God.
And so the policeman starts laughing, and he says, but we don't have a team there. And I said, are you sure? Why don't you check with your command? Maybe they just didn't tell you because they're notorious for not communicating. And it got worse from there. It was really disappointing. And that's not a negative comment about the local police. They're doing their job really well. It's the federal police that are in here trying to manipulate and thumbing down, and they don't do a very good job.
Do you feel like that might be like whether it be Holder's or DC's influence on the area?
It was absolutely Eric Holder's, because it was Department of Justice snipers that were so goofy in that house.
Just the idea of goofy snipers. It's just like...
You should have had the rifles pointed at you.
Yeah.
If you think that's a bad deal. Yeah, a guy that can't set up a hide pointing a rifle at you and your men?
Yeah.
That's disconcerting.
Yeah.
At the bare minimum.
Yeah. Do you feel as though that there's been kind of a disconnect with the rule of law when it comes to the federal agencies even here?
Absolutely. You know, we have really good local law enforcement here. Now, that's not to say that a local law enforcement officer doesn't make mistakes or doesn't be a little too aggressive or not aggressive enough. It's a tough job. You know, and until you've done the job, you probably shouldn't be criticizing them, because it's really hard to make a snap decision perfectly every time. But we have an outstanding group of guys here locally, And then we have these buffoons that are feds that come in and piss everybody off and violate people's rights and threaten people. Because I'm an oath keeper, I had a federal vehicle parked outside my house today intimidating my wife.
Are you, if I don't want to give you specific, are you a general local, or are you, where are you from?
I was born and raised in St. Louis.
Oh, really?
Born in Kirkwood, Missouri.
Oh, cool.
St. Louis County.
Cool. Are there a lot of oath keepers in the area, or like local?
There's a few oath keepers in the St. Louis area, not very many. Most of them are older gentlemen, retired military, or retired law enforcement.
Yeah.
Not a lot of younger guys.
We were talking a moment ago after the interview about the timing of the release and Nixon's position as Governor Nixon, his position as chief executive.
Chief law enforcement executive in the state.
Yeah.
He's the governor. He's the boss. Yeah. The buck stops with him.
So why do you think that? What do you think about his timing, or the timing of the prosecutor's release of the non-indictment?
Well, it's not just timing; it's coordination. Governor Nixon had over 2 months to prepare the National Guard and put in a strategy to protect the people of Ferguson, and he controlled the timing of the release of the grand jury's decision. And he left the small businessmen and the residents of Ferguson to burn that first night, while he used guard assets and police assets in the wealthy areas of Clayton and downtown St. Louis. He basically protected his big money constituents and left these people in this town, the average American, to burn. And the people of Ferguson paid an enormous price. There were people killed. There were businesses burnt to the ground. There were people beaten up. And with the guard here on the second night, all of that was greatly mitigated. So it begs the question, why wasn't the guard here on the first night? He had 2 months to prepare. He knew, and all the law enforcement agencies, they knew what was going to happen. So why didn't the governor orchestrate a plan that protected the blue-collar people and the small businessmen in Ferguson and businesswomen? That's a question that's yet to be answered by Nixon.
Why do you think the timing was one thing that really bothered me about doing it at 8 o'clock as opposed to doing it in the morning, which might allow people to organize and get ready and...
Well, the dirty little secret is that there have been federal government people involved in this from the beginning and pushing things down the pipe through the Democratic machine. And no law enforcement officer or guard officer, commissioned officer, with any measure of sanity would have released the grand jury decision at 8 o'clock in the evening. That's almost negligent behavior to release it at 8 o'clock in the evening. Now, you may say they're just incompetent. The grand jury made a decision. McCullough's speechwriters had to write some things. He had to review it. It took X amount of time, and they wanted to get the message out as quickly as possible. A lot of us in the state of Missouri, and particularly in the St. Louis area, wish they'd have used a little more common sense, because the cost of that decision was enormous. And there's the argument, well, it would have happened anyway. But there's no excuse for not having the guard in place beforehand. That's inexcusable.
Or even just waiting till the next morning. Like, I don't think anyone in media wouldn't have minded. No one would have cared, and no one would have thought less of it. I mean, personally, so.
Well, there's no excuse for having 2 months to prepare and then being a day late with your protection.
Yeah.
And when you see, like tonight and last night, the fantastic coordination between the police and the guard, they've done a great job in mitigating the damage in this town once they're allowed to be here.
Yeah.